"What are you giving to my son?" The voice came sharp, controlled, but heavy enough to silence the whole cafeteria. Maya froze mid-bite, her small hands clutching half a sandwich. Across from her, 7-year-old Edwin Clanton went pale, eyes darting toward the tall man, now standing at the door. "Dad!" Edwin whispered. But Wesley Clanton was already moving, slow, measured steps across the tiled floor, his gaze locked on the little girl sitting opposite his son. His tailored suit, polished shoes, they didn't belong in a school cafeteria, and everyone knew it. The teacher started forward nervously. "Mr. Clanton, sir, it's all right." She was just... "I asked a question," Wesley said, voice low. "What's in her hand?" Maya's lip trembled. It's just a sandwich, sir." "He said he wasn't eating," Wesley blinked. A sandwich, that's it. But his son was chewing, actually chewing, for the first time in weeks. The billionaire looked at Edwin, then back at the little girl. "You gave that to him?" She nodded. "Mama says nobody should eat alone." And for the first time since his wife's funeral, Wesley felt his chest tighten. Not from grief this time, but from something softer. Because in that one small act, a janitor's daughter had reached a place his money never could. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The cafeteria was loud that afternoon, plastic trays clattering, sneakers squeaking, kids laughing with mouths full of peanut butter sandwiches. But at the far end of the room, sitting alone by the window, Edwin Clanton just stared at his lunchbox. He didn't touch it. He never did. It was a brand new lunchbox. His dad's assistant had bought it, packed with the kind of food every kid was supposed to love: turkey sandwich, fruit cup, chocolate milk. But to Edwin, it all looked wrong. It wasn't the same. It didn't smell like her. Every day since his mum's funeral, he opened the box, looked at the sandwich, and quietly closed it again. The other kids thought he was picky. The teachers said he was just adjusting, but the truth was, Edwin couldn't eat anything that wasn't made by his mother's hands. And no one knew that. He sat there, quiet as a ghost in the middle of the noise, until a small voice broke through the hum of the cafeteria. "Hey, you're not going to eat that?" He looked up. Standing there was Maya McGee, a tiny girl with 2 puffballs in her hair and a pink backpack that looked like it had seen better days. She was holding half a sandwich wrapped in crinkled foil. Edwin shook his head, not saying a word. Maya frowned a little. "You sick or something? You look hungry." Edwin's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not really. "I'm fine." Maya sat across from him anyway, legs swinging under the table. She unwrapped her sandwich, a slightly squished peanut butter and jelly, and took a big bite. Then she noticed him watching her. "You sure?" she said, mouth full but eyes kind. "My mama says you shouldn't let food go to waste. You can have the other half if you want." He hesitated. His stomach growled loud enough that both of them heard it. Maya giggled softly. "See, even your tummy disagrees." Edwin stared at her hand, the small half sandwich she was holding out. His mother used to do that, always cutting it in half, saying, "Half for me, half for my little man." For a second, the cafeteria faded away. He could almost hear her voice again, smell her perfume, feel her hand brushing crumbs off his cheek. He blinked fast. Maya nudged the sandwich closer. "It's just peanut butter. Ain't poison or nothing," she said, with a grin that was missing one front tooth. Edwin's fingers trembled when he reached out. He took it. He didn't say thank you, didn't even look up, just stared at it like it might vanish if he blinked. Then slowly, he took a bite. And for the first time in weeks, he ate. Maya smiled like she'd won a prize. "Told you, it's good, huh?" He nodded, his throat tight. He didn't know why it felt like he might cry. Maybe it was because the peanut butter stuck to the roof of his mouth, Or maybe because for the first time since his mum died, something felt okay again. After that day, Maya made it a routine. Every lunch period, she'd show up at his table, even when he didn't talk, even when he barely looked at her. Sometimes she'd bring an extra cookie from home, sometimes it was apple slices, sometimes just half a sandwich again. And every single time she'd say the same thing before handing it over. "Don't let your tummy boss you around, okay?" He'd roll his eyes a little, but he'd take it. Maya didn't know who he was. She didn't know his father was Wesley Clanton, one of the richest men in the state, or that his house had more rooms than her whole street. To her, Edwin was just that quiet kid who didn't eat. And to Edwin, Maya wasn't just that talkative girl with the messy braids. She was the only person who didn't treat him like he was broken. One rainy afternoon, the cafeteria was extra noisy, kids trapped inside because recess was cancelled. Edwin sat with Maya as usual, and she started showing him doodles she'd made on a napkin. "See, that's me, and that's you," she said, proudly, pointing to two stick figures, one with curly hair, one with a crown. "Why do I have a crown?" he asked. She shrugged. "'Cause you look like one of them storybook princes who forgot how to smile." He laughed, really laughed this time. It startled both of them. Maya's eyes went wide. "Hey, you laughed." "I didn't think you knew how." "Guess I forgot," he said quietly. "Then I'll remind you," she said, and grinned again. Days turned into weeks. Teachers started noticing Edwin's change. He paid more attention, smiled sometimes, even joined in group work. Nobody knew what caused it. But every day at lunch, Maya and Edwin sat together like it was the most natural thing in the world. One day, she came in late, looking upset. "What's wrong?" Edwin asked. She shrugged, eyes glossy. "Mummy said they might fire her soon. She's been cleaning floors at some big company, and they said they're cutting staff again." He frowned. "That's not fair." "Grown-ups do unfair things all the time," she said, her voice too wise for a 7-year-old. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just split his lunch in half, the one his dad's assistant packed, and handed it to her. Her eyes widened. "You sharing with me?" He smiled faintly. "Guess it's about time I returned the favor." She took it, grinning through her sadness. "My mama says people who share food got good hearts." That moment stuck with Edwin. Not because of the food, but because for the first time he realized maybe his mom would have liked Maya. Maybe she would have said, "That little girl's got light in her, Edwin. Keep her close." And in some quiet way, that's exactly what he did. A week later, during lunch, Maya noticed Edwin looking distant again. "Hey," she said, waving a cookie in front of him. "Where'd you go just now?" He looked at her, and for a moment, his eyes watered. "I was just thinking about my mum." Maya didn't flinch or change the subject like adults usually did. She just nodded. "Mine says when people go to heaven, they watch us from the stars." Edwin blinked. "You think so?" She nodded again, confident. "Yep, that's why I say goodnight to the stars every night. Maybe your mama's listening too." For the first time in months, Edwin smiled without effort. "Then I guess I'll start saying goodnight too." "Good," Maya said. "You better, or I'll tell on you to the stars." He chuckled. "You're weird." She gasped dramatically. "Takes one to know one." They both burst into laughter that carried across the room. Two kids with completely different worlds finding comfort in peanut butter sandwiches and shared silence. But what Edwin didn't know was that the same woman Maya called Mama, Nikki McGee, worked as a janitor at his father's company. The same building his dad had been locked inside for months, drowning in work just to avoid his own grief, and that soon their worlds would collide in a way neither of them could imagine. The black SUV pulled up to Ridgeview Elementary right after lunch hour. The driver stepped out, jogged around, and opened the door for Wesley Clanton. Even standing still, Wesley looked like motion. Tall, sharp suit, wristwatch that screamed wealth, eyes that hadn't known rest in months. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to admit that his son's teacher had been calling, saying Edwin barely talked, barely ate, barely existed. He had told himself he'd fixed things before, broken companies, bankrupt departments, markets in chaos. But this wasn't something money could fix, and that terrified him. 5 minutes, he muttered to his assistant, walking toward the entrance. I just want to see him, not cause a scene. The smell of school lunch hit him in the hallway. Mashed potatoes, fruit juice, disinfectant. He hated it immediately. But then he heard it, faint, carried through the chatter of kids and clinking trays. A laugh, his son's laugh. He froze. For a second he thought his mind was playing tricks. Edwin hadn't laughed, hadn't smiled, since the funeral, not once. He turned toward the cafeteria window and saw it. His little boy sitting at the far end of the room, laughing, laughing. Across from him sat a small, black girl with curly hair, swinging her legs under the table and holding half a sandwich out like it was treasure. She said something, he couldn't hear what, and Edwin covered his mouth, trying not to laugh too loud. Wesley's chest tightened. He couldn't move, he couldn't even breathe. He pushed the door open quietly, stepping inside. Teachers noticed him. They always did. But he waved them off with a look. His gaze stayed locked on his son. Edwin didn't notice him at first. He was too busy chewing, his cheeks full, eyes bright, looking alive for the first time in months. Then the girl laughed again and wiped a crumb off his chin, saying, "You eat like a baby raccoon." And his son laughed harder. Something broke in Wesley right then, something heavy and rusted that had been sitting on his chest for months. He didn't know whether to smile or cry. He took a step forward, voice low but rough. "What are you giving to my son?" The voice came sharp, controlled, but heavy enough to silence the whole cafeteria. Maya froze mid-bite, her small hands clutching half a sandwich. Across from her, 7-year-old Edwin Clanton went pale, eyes darting toward the tall man now standing at the door. "Dad," Edwin whispered. But Wesley Clanton was already moving, slow, measured steps across the tiled floor, his gaze locked on the little girl sitting opposite his son. His tailored suit, polished shoes, they didn't belong in a school cafeteria, and everyone knew it. The teacher started forward nervously. "Mr. Clanton, sir, it's all right. She was just—" "I asked a question," Wesley said, voice low. "What's in her hand?" Maya's lip trembled. It's just a sandwich, sir." "He said he wasn't eating." Wesley blinked. A sandwich. That's it. But his son was chewing, actually chewing, for the first time in weeks. The billionaire looked at Edwin, then back at the little girl. "You gave that to him?" She nodded. "My mama says nobody should eat alone." He knelt down beside the table, looking at the sandwich in his son's hand. Peanut butter and jelly, smeared unevenly, packed with love instead of money. He hadn't seen that kind of care in a long time. He turned to Maya. "Did you make that?" Maya shook her head. "My mama did. I just shared it." He looked hungry. Her tone was honest, innocent, like she didn't understand who she was talking to, or maybe she didn't care. Wesley blinked hard. The words hit deeper than he expected. He looked hungry, not just for food, for something else, something Wesley had been too broken to give. He looked back at his son, crumbs on his lips, eyes still shining, and realized what he was seeing. Peace, happiness, something he couldn't buy with all the millions in his bank account. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're smiling." Edwin tilted his head. "Is that bad?" Wesley swallowed hard. "No, son, that's the best thing I've seen in a long time." Maya grinned proudly, like she'd accomplished something huge. "Told you he just needed lunch." Her simplicity disarmed him completely. There was no pretense in her, no fear of status or money, just a little girl doing what she thought was right. A teacher hurried over, trying to smooth the tension. "Mr. Clanton, we didn't know you'd be visiting today. Edwin's been doing better lately, making friends, eating. Wesley raised a hand gently. It's fine, I see that. He looked at Maya again. And you? Maya, right? She nodded, clutching her foil wrapper like it was a shield. Yes, sir. Thank you, he said, the words sounding foreign but genuine. You've done more for my son than anyone else has. Maya blinked, unsure how to respond. I just shared my lunch. Sometimes, Wesley said softly. That's all it takes. When he finally left the cafeteria, something inside him had shifted. His assistant was waiting by the car, confused by the delay. Sir, how did it go? She asked. Wesley looked out through the glass doors, back toward where his son sat with that little girl. He smiled faintly. My son smiled today, he said quietly. Then after a pause, find out who that girl's parents are. That night, Wesley couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maya's face, bright, unbothered, kind, and his son's laughter echoing through that noisy cafeteria. It haunted him in the best way. Because in that one small moment, a janitor's daughter had done something all his wealth couldn't. She'd given his son a reason to feel again. And Wesley Clanton, billionaire, widower, father, didn't know whether to feel humbled, grateful, or ashamed. Maybe all three. The next morning, Wesley Clanton sat at his office desk, but he wasn't really there. His mind was still in that cafeteria. His son's laughter echoing that little girl's bright smile, the sandwich half-eaten in Edwin's small hands. He had meetings stacked back to back, documents waiting for his signature, a deal closing in Singapore. Yet none of it mattered. All he could think about was the girl. Maya. She'd done something none of his therapists, tutors, or nannies could do. She'd reached Edwin, and when Wesley said, "Find out who that girl's parents are," his assistant, Donna, didn't expect him to mean it so literally. "Sir," she said, walking in with a file in hand. "You asked about the girl, Maya McGee?" He looked up, immediately attentive. "Yes. What did you find?" Donna flipped open the file. "Her mother's name is Nikki McGee. Works here, actually." Wesley frowned. "Here? As in this building?" "Yes, sir. Third floor custodial team, night shift." Donna hesitated. "Single mother, no record of a husband. She's been with the company for about 2 years now." Wesley leaned back, stunned. A janitor in his building, the same building he'd practically lived in since his wife died, and he'd never noticed her. "Would you like me to schedule a meeting?" Donna asked. He thought about it, then nodded slowly. "No, I'll talk to her myself." That evening, long after most of the employees had gone home, Wesley stayed behind. He said it was to review quarterly projections. But the truth was he couldn't bring himself to leave. He wanted to see her. He didn't even know what he'd say, just that he needed to say something. Around 8 o'clock, he heard the faint hum of a vacuum in the hallway. He followed it quietly until he saw her, Nikki McGee, in a faded grey uniform, her hair tied back, earbuds in, mopping the floor under the cold fluorescent lights. For a moment, Wesley just watched. She moved with a rhythm, tired but steady. Every swipe of the mop was efficient, practiced, humble. And yet something about her seemed familiar. He stepped closer. "Mrs. McGee?" She startled, pulling out one earbud. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't see you there." She straightened immediately, eyes darting to his name badge. "Mr. Clanton, good evening." Her voice carried both warmth and weariness, the kind of tone life carves into people who work too hard for too little. "You work here in the evenings?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes, sir. 2 years now, mostly the 3rd and 4th floors." She smiled politely. "Did I miss a spot?" He shook his head. "No, nothing like that." He hesitated. "You have a daughter, don't you?" "Maya." Her face softened instantly. "Yes, sir. That's my baby." "She goes to Ridgeview Elementary?" "Yes, sir." She tilted her head, curious. "How do you—" Wesley cut in gently. "She's, friends with my son, Edwin? Nicky froze. The mop stopped mid-swipe. Your son? Yes. He smiled faintly. They've become quite close, I think. Nicky blinked rapidly, trying to process. Oh my God, you're that Mr. Clanton. Her hand flew to her chest. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize. He raised a hand to calm her. It's fine, Mrs. McGee, please. I didn't come to talk about work. He hesitated, searching for words that didn't sound corporate or cold. I came because I saw your daughter yesterday. She frowned slightly. Is she okay? She's more than okay, Wesley said softly. She's the reason my son smiled for the first time in months. Nicky's lips parted in surprise. Maya? He nodded. I saw her sharing her lunch with him, talking to him, making him laugh. You don't know what that means to me. Her eyes glistened a little. That sounds just like her. She's always had this big heart. Gets it from her grandma. She laughed weakly. Can't stand seeing people lonely. Wesley's voice lowered. You've raised a wonderful girl. For a second, silence filled the space between them. Then something flickered in his expression. Curiosity and recognition. He stepped closer. Mrs. McGee, forgive me, but have we met before? She blinked. I don't think so, sir. He tilted his head, studying her face under the harsh office light. Years ago, at Clanton Engineering, during the restructuring period. Were you? Her eyes dropped. Yes, sir. A quiet admission. I used to work in your logistics department before the layoffs. When the company merged, I lost my position. The air grew heavy. He remembered that time. Thousands of names, hundreds of faces, all hidden behind spreadsheets and signatures. He remembered the reports. Unprofitable divisions, necessary cuts. He had approved them, all of them. He had never thought twice, until now. I didn't know, he said quietly. I didn't know where everyone ended up. Nicky gave a small shrug. Life goes where it goes, sir. I found work where I could. Custodial jobs, honest work. Pays the bills. She smiled sadly. Maya's worth every shift. Wesley felt something heavy crawl into his chest. Guilt. Real, human guilt. The woman he'd once signed off to let go was now cleaning his floors and raising the little girl who had just healed his son. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low. For back then, for now, for all of it. She looked at him, not angry, not bitter, just tired, but kind. You don't owe me that, sir. We all got stories. Mine just took a turn I didn't expect. He nodded slowly, his throat tight. Still, I should have known. I should have looked closer. Don't be too hard on yourself, she said softly, returning to her mop. Sometimes life don't let us look close enough. He stood there a moment longer, watching her finish. The silence was thick, filled with the sound of the mop sliding over tile, rhythmic, humble, human. Before he left, he said quietly, You raised a remarkable daughter, Mrs. McGee. She reminded my boy how to live again. And with that, he turned and walked away. But each step felt heavier than the last. Because the deeper truth had finally landed. The woman his company once discarded had unknowingly saved his family. The cafeteria was quiet that morning, too quiet for a room filled with children. Teachers whispered in corners, pretending not to watch as Wesley Clanton stood by the doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on his son. Edwin sat across from Maya McGee again, his lunchbox open but untouched. She was talking softly, her braids tied with bright blue ribbons that looked a little too big for her small head. The other kids didn't pay attention. They'd gotten used to seeing the billionaire's son and the janitor's daughter together. Wesley cleared his throat as he approached. Edwin, he said, his voice calm but heavy. Can we talk for a moment? Maya immediately stood up, clutching her sandwich. Sorry, sir. We were just... It's all right, Wesley interrupted gently. You're Maya, right? She nodded, unsure if she'd done something wrong. Wesley crouched down to face his son. You haven't eaten breakfast again, he said quietly. I thought we agreed. But Edwin didn't let him finish. He looked up, his small voice trembling but clear. "She reminds me of Mum." The cafeteria went still. Even the sound of trays clattering stopped. Wesley blinked. "What did you say?" Edwin swallowed hard, eyes darting toward Maya, then back at his father. "When she talks to me, when she smiles, it feels like Mum's here again." A sharp ache filled Wesley's chest. His throat tightened. He hadn't heard his son talk about his mother in months. He didn't even cry at the funeral. He just stopped. Maya, confused, took a small step back. "I didn't mean to—" Wesley raised a hand, stopping her. "You didn't do anything wrong." His voice cracked slightly. "You did what none of us could." Edwin turned toward Maya again, his tone soft. "You make the sandwiches like she used to." "Not too much jam, just enough. Mum used to do that." Maya's eyes widened. "My mama says too much jam makes your stomach hurt," she said, smiling nervously. Wesley let out a shaky breath, realizing the weight of his son's words. In that moment, the billionaire standing in an expensive suit wasn't looking at a janitor's daughter. He was looking at the reason his little boy was slowly coming back to life. The teachers pretended to busy themselves, giving the family a sliver of privacy. But the whispers started. How the richest man in the city was being humbled by the kindness of a child from nothing. Wesley crouched beside his son again, brushing a hand over his hair. "Your mum would have liked her too," he said softly. Edwin nodded. "Can she come over sometime?" Wesley hesitated, his eyes meeting Maya's. "We'll see," he said. "We'll see." But deep down he already knew. This little girl had done something extraordinary. She didn't just remind his son of the woman he lost. She reminded him too. And for the first time since the funeral, Wesley Clanton, the man who had everything, felt something break open in his chest. Not grief this time. Hope. The night had fallen over the Clanton estate, silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the study. Wesley sat at his mahogany desk, the faint glow of his laptop illuminating tired eyes. He had told himself he'd only check a few files. A routine background review after meeting Nikki McGee again. But something about her name wouldn't leave him alone. He scrolled through old company records, employee logs from 7 years ago, the same year his wife, Amelia, died. He clicked through one folder after another until a scanned report caught his attention. Accident assistance statement. Employee, Nikki McGee. Wesley frowned, opening the document. His breath caught as the first lines appeared. Witness identified as Nikki McGee, former administrative assistant at Clanton Enterprises, was first on scene at the accident site, rendered aid to Mrs. Amelia Clanton before emergency services arrived. His fingers froze on the trackpad. He leaned closer, reading every word, his pulse quickening. Provided CPR for approximately 8 minutes until paramedics arrived. Sustained minor injuries from broken glass. Wesley's throat went dry. He stared at the date. 7 years ago to the day. The accident that shattered his world. The name of the woman who had been there, holding his wife's hand as she slipped away. Nikki McGee. The same woman now mopping his office floors. The same woman whose daughter had brought his son back to life. He sat back, slowly, the reality settling like a storm in his chest. All these years, he'd thought no one had been with Amelia in those final moments. The police told him she was alone when they arrived. He never questioned it. He didn't want to. But she hadn't been alone. Someone stayed. Someone tried to save her. A soft knock pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to see Nikki herself, standing hesitantly at the door, clutching a folder. "I didn't mean to bother you, Mr. Clanton," she said. "I just came to return the maintenance reports." Wesley stared at her. Really stared. The same calm eyes, the same quiet strength he hadn't noticed before. He stood slowly, voice low. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Nikki froze. "Tell you? What?" He picked up the printed report and placed it on the desk between them. That you were there, with Amelia. Her lips parted in shock. For a long moment she didn't speak, then her shoulders sagged. You weren't supposed to know. Why? His voice cracked slightly. You tried to save her? You were there. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Because it didn't matter who was there. It didn't change what happened. I didn't want you to think I was looking for something, pity or a job or... He shook his head. Nikki, you held her hand when I couldn't. You stayed. She looked away, her voice trembling. She kept saying your name, over and over. I told her you were on your way. I told her she wasn't alone. Wesley's composure broke. He pressed a hand over his mouth, struggling to breathe through the weight of it. I didn't know, he whispered. All these years, I thought that no one cared enough to stop, Nikki said softly. I did. But she was gone before the ambulance came. Silence filled the room, heavy, sacred. Then Wesley's voice, barely audible. And now your daughter? She's the one who brought my boy back. Nikki smiled faintly through her tears. Maybe it's just life finding its way to make peace. Wesley nodded slowly, emotion thick in his throat. He looked down at the report again, then at her. You didn't just save Amelia that day, Nikki. You saved what was left of her. Through Maya? Her hand trembled as she placed the folder on his desk. I just did what anyone would have done. But Wesley knew better. Fate had brought them together once by tragedy, and again by grace. As she turned to leave, he called out softly, Thank you, for both of them. And when the door closed behind her, Wesley Clanton sat alone under the quiet hum of the study light, tears blurring his vision. For the first time in 7 years, he didn't just remember the day his wife died. He remembered the day someone tried to keep her alive, and that someone had raised the little girl who had just saved his son's heart. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the wide windows of Clanton Enterprises, light that felt different, softer, as if the building itself had taken a deep breath after years of silence. Employees whispered as Wesley Clanton walked through the lobby, not with his usual sharp stride, but with quiet purpose. He wasn't the same man who used to count profits instead of people. Something inside him had shifted, like a clock that finally found its rhythm again. Inside the boardroom, a long table stretched under the glow of chandeliers. His executives were already seated, papers and laptops open, ready for another typical meeting about numbers and expansion plans. But Wesley didn't take his usual seat at the head of the table. He stood by the window holding a single folder and a small photograph. It was of Edwin and Maya sitting on the school bench, sharing that now famous peanut butter sandwich. When the room quieted, Wesley turned to them. 7 years ago, he began, voice steady but heavy, this company made choices that cost people their jobs. At the time I thought it was just business. I was wrong. He placed the folder on the table. Inside is a proposal, a new foundation, the Maya McGee Hope Fund. Confused murmurs rippled across the table. It's a scholarship, Wesley continued, for children who show kindness when no one's watching. The kind of kindness that changes lives even when the world isn't paying attention. Someone from accounting cleared his throat. Sir, do you mean like a charity program? Wesley smiled faintly. No, not charity, legacy. He looked at the photo again before setting it down. Because a janitor's daughter did something this company I couldn't do with all our money and power. She gave my son peace. The room went silent. Not a shuffle, not a cough, just the sound of truth hanging in the air. Later that afternoon, Wesley called Nikki McGee to his office. She arrived nervously, still in her uniform, wiping her hands on a folded towel. You wanted to see me, sir? Yes, Wesley said, gesturing for her to sit. And please, call me Wesley. She blinked, unsure how to respond. All right, Wesley. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. This is your new contract, effective immediately. She frowned, confused. New contract? He nodded. You're no longer working in janitorial. I'm promoting you to head of community outreach. Her eyes widened. What? Wesley smiled, that same warm human smile she hadn't seen before. You've spent years cleaning these halls, Nikki, but the truth is, you didn't just clean this building. You cleaned the dust off my son's heart. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at him. Mr. Clark, Wesley, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. You'll oversee the Hope Fund. Help find kids like Maya. Kids who remind us that the world still has goodness in it. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. You don't owe me this. He leaned forward, shaking his head. You're wrong. I owe you everything. My son smiles again because of your daughter, and because of you, I remember what it feels like to be human again. There was a knock at the door. Edwin peeked in, holding Maya's hand. Both of them grinning, faces smudged with cookie crumbs. Dad, can Maya come over for dinner tonight? Wesley chuckled. She can come any time she wants. Maya beamed, and Nikki's tears finally fell. As the children ran off down the hallway, their laughter echoing through the glass walls, Wesley stood at his window watching them. Two little hearts who had unknowingly rebuilt a man's faith in love, in people, in second chances. He turned to Nikki once more. You once tried to save my wife, he said softly. Now you've helped save the part of her that lives in my son. Nikki's voice broke. Maybe we were both meant to cross paths again. Wesley smiled. No, maybe about it. That evening, he renamed the Clanton Foundation's main wing, a new plaque shining under the golden light of the lobby. The Maya McGee Hope Fund for the kindness that heals the world. And for the first time in years, Wesley Clanton felt something money had never been able to buy. Peace that stayed, not charity, not business, just love rediscovered through kindness. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.